Every thought you think, every habit engage in, and every emotion you feel, these are not just experiences, they are patterns carved into the structure of your brain. And here's the truth that changes everything. Your brain is not fixed. It is not a finished product. It is moldable, adaptable, and waiting for new instructions. We live in a world where people talk about change like it's magic, like some overnight transformation will rescue them. But real change, it's biological. It's grounded in the rewiring of your nervous system. Let's strip this down to what's real. Your brain is a dense network of approximately 86 billion neurons. Each one is capable of forming thousands of connections with other neurons. These connections, called synapses, are the foundation of your thoughts, your emotions, your behaviors. And here's the kicker, these connections strengthen or weaken depending on how you use them. If you repeat a behavior, if you dwell on a thought, if you respond to stress in a particular way, your brain builds a highway to that path faster, easier, and more automatic. That's neuroplasticity. So when you say, I always feel anxious, or I'm just not a morning person, or I can't focus, those aren't permanent traits. Those are neural circuits you've been rehearsing, maybe for years. But the science is clear and you can rewire them. First, attention is the gateway. What you focus on literally determines which circuits in your brain get activated and which get reinforced. If you constantly give your attention to stress, distractions, and negative self-talk, you strengthen those patterns. If you start directing your attention deliberately toward growth, purpose, and solutions, you begin to rewire. The brain follows attention like a GPS. If you want to change your brain, don't wait for motivation. Aim your attention, train it, discipline it, guard it. Second, repetition is not boring. It's essential. Neuroplasticity isn't a one-time event. It's a daily decision. When you engage in a new behavior, like breathwork, focus work blocks, or gratitude journaling, you activate certain circuits. But only repetition with focus and emotion tells the brain, this matters. Make this the new default. Think of it like this, you're laying down tracks for a train. One run doesn't build the system, but run it every day with intention, and the old tracks, the ones leading to procrastination, anxiety, negativity, they start to degrade. And the new tracks, they become your new normal. Thirding, your state matters. The brain doesn't rewire equally in all states. If you're chronically stressed, flooded with cortisol, in shallow sleep cycles, or overstimulated by screens, your ability to adapt is reduced. Why? Because your nervous system is in survival mode, not learning mode. You want to rewire. Get your body on board. Master your physiology. Learn how to breathe in a way that calms the system. Use natural sunlight to reset your circadian rhythm. Move your body regularly. These are not lifestyle suggestions. They are biological prerequisites for plasticity. Sleep, for example, is when your brain consolidates new learning. No sleep, no change. Period. Fourth, the brain loves challenge, just not chaos. Growth happens when you stretch, not snap. Rewiring requires that you push your boundaries. Yes, but with structure. Want to develop focus? Practice it in 90-minute deep work sessions. Want to beat anxiety? Expose yourself to discomfort gradually, like learning to sit with stillness. Want to cultivate gratitude? Don't just feel it. Write it, speak it, rehearse it. The brain is like a muscle. Stress it, rest it, repeat. That's how strength is built. Fifth, the stories you tell shape the circuits you build. Your self-talk isn't just philosophical. It's physiological. If you constantly say, I'll never change, your brain listens, and it builds accordingly. But if you begin to speak from a place of transformation, even before it fully arrives, you're priming circuits for change. Start simply. I'm learning to focus. I'm building resilience. I'm rewiring. These aren't lies. They're instructions. You are not your past. You are the architect of the next neural version of you. And it begins with language, repetition, and belief aligned with action. Sixth, your environment matters. You cannot rewire your brain and stay stuck in the same toxic environment. Why? Because the C's in your surroundings trigger the same old neural loops. Rewiring requires friction. That might mean unfollowing the noise, changing who you listen to, adjusting your workspace, creating an environment that supports clarity, not chaos. You're not just changing your thoughts, you're changing what activates them. Finally, rewiring is not just personal, it's powerful. When you rewire your brain, you change how you see problems. You change how you respond to setbacks. You become more aware, more focused, more emotionally resilient. And guess what? That impacts everyone around you. Your brain is a command center. If you train it well, it becomes a tool for service, leadership, and innovation. But if you let it run on autopilot, it becomes a factory of limitations. So you have a choice. You can let the world your brain for distraction, fear, and mediocrity. Or you can take the reins. You can wake every day and deciding, today, I train my mind. Today, I choose what circuits get stronger. Today, I rewire. And over time, thought by thought, your neural circuitry, pattern by pattern, you'll become the proof that the brain was never the limit. It was always the beginning. What you focus on, you strengthen. That is not just a motivational phrase. It's a biological fact. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on what you direct your attention toward. Focus is the signal that tells your nervous system, this matters. Build more resources here. Your attention sculpts the shape and strength of neural pathways. Neurons that fire together, wire together. That is the core mechanism of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change itself based on experience. And every experience you have is filtered through where your focus is placed. You have within you a system that decides what gets amplified and what gets ignored. This system is not neutral. It doesn't treat everything equally. It filters your reality. It decides what you remember, what you feel, what you act on, and ultimately what kind of person you become. That system is your attention. If you focus on problems all day long, your brain becomes excellent at identifying problems. If you focus on what's missing, your neural circuitry is wrong, and what's broken, your mind becomes an expert in lack, anxiety, and fear. But if you train your focus on solutions, on growth, on what you can control, your brain begins to reconfigure itself around opportunity, action, and resilience. This isn't mindset coaching. It's neuroscience. Your thoughts follow your focus. Your emotions respond to your focus. And your brain changes in accordance with it. Inside your brain, the areas responsible for directing attention, like the prefrontal cortex and parietal lobes, serve as the command center. These regions coordinate which parts of your brain should be activated more often. If you repeatedly focus on a certain topic, experience, or emotion, those areas of your brain begin to fire more frequently and with more intensity. Eventually, they recruit more neurons, build stronger synaptic connections, and become the dominant mental circuitry. It's like walking through a field. The more you walk a specific path, the more visible and easy that path becomes. Similarly, your focus creates well-worn trails in your brain that become automatic over time. This is why anxiety can feel like a default. If your focus constantly returns to uncertainty, imagined threats, and worst-case scenarios, you're rehearsing anxiety in real time. Your brain, responding to that repetition, says, let's make this easier. Let's make this faster. Let's make this who you are. But the good news is that this same system works in your favor if you shift your focus toward peace, gratitude, courage, or discipline. Every time you deliberately redirect your attention, you are resisting an old pathway and initiating a new one. That act alone, resisting what's automatic and choosing what's intentional, is the essence of rewiring. But it's not just about what you focus on. It's about how you focus. The quality of your attention matters. Shallow focus, scattered attention, multitasking, these dilute the signal. And the brain doesn't rewire well under distraction. But deep focus, singular attention, and deliberate engagement, that's what creates strong neural connections. Your brain takes that kind of input seriously. It says, this experience is important. Let's make it easier to access next time. That's how people develop mastery. That's how habits form. That's how change becomes lasting. Think about your habits. Good or bad, every habit is a byproduct of repeated focus and action. You didn't become addicted to your phone overnight. You trained your focus to respond to every ping, buzz, and scroll. You didn't lose your ability to focus by accident. You trained your brain day by day to be dependent on novelty and stimulation. But the beautiful part is that the same mechanism that weakened your focus can rebuild it. When you sit down and eliminate distractions, when you push through boredom and engage deeply, you are telling your brain, we're building something here, and your brain listens. Focus is like a muscle. The more you train it, the stronger it gets. And just like training in a gym, you have to work past the point of comfort to make gains. You have to direct your intentionally, even when it's difficult, even when you'd rather escape, even when the old circuits beg for your return. That moment of choice is where rewiring happens. That moment where you say, no, I'm not feeding that pattern anymore. I'm choosing something better. That's the moment you are shaping your future self. But there's something deeper. Your focus doesn't just shape your neural circuits. It shapes your identity. What you repeatedly give your attention to becomes your inner world. If you focus on guilt, you become guilt-ridden. If you focus on fear, you become fearful. If you focus on power, discipline, faith, growth, you begin to embody those traits. It's not magic. It's biology. Your brain becomes what you teach it to value. That's why changing your life requires changing your focus. Because if you don't own your attention, the world will. Algorithms are designed to hijack your focus. Advertisements are engineered to manipulate your attention. Even your own unconscious patterns, built through years of repetition, will try to steer your focus back to comfort zones and familiar narratives. So you must be vigilant. You must decide, consciously, what deserves your attention and what does not. Because where your attention goes, your energy flows. And where your energy flows, your life follows. There's also something you need to know about the reticular activating system, the part of your brainstem responsible for filtering sensory input and deciding what enters conscious awareness. This system is highly sensitive to your focus. If you constantly think about failure, your brain will begin to filter the world through that lens. It will highlight situations, people, and events that confirm your beliefs. But if you begin to focus on progress, even small wins, your brain begins to highlight more opportunities for growth. Your perception literally changes. That's not mindset fluff. That's a real-time biological response to focus. This is also why gratitude practices, visualization, and mental rehearsal work. When you direct your focus toward a future you want to build, when you visualize it with detail, clarity, and emotion, you're activating the same neural pathways that would be used if the experience were real. You are, in effect, building the future in your brain before it exists in your environment. And the more you do it, the more likely your brain is to guide your behavior in ways that make that future real. Focus isn't passive, it's creative. It constructs reality from the inside out. You can begin today, right now. Ask yourself, what am I focusing on? If your answer is rooted in fear, comparison, regret, or resentment, then understand that your brain is reinforcing those patterns. Every second you dwell there is a second spent building a mental model that limits you. But you can stop, you can interrupt the pattern, you can redirect. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to begin. Focus on who you want to become. Focus on who you build. Focus on what you can control. Focus on what brings clarity and not chaos. Focus on what adds value to your life, not what drains it. And when your mind wanders, and it will, you bring it back. Not with judgment, but with determination. Over and over again, you bring it back. That's how neuroplasticity works. That's how new circuits grow. That's how transformation becomes inevitable. The truth is your future is being shaped by your present focus. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. This very moment is sending instructions to your brain about who to become, so choose wisely. Because what you focus on, you strengthen. And what you strengthen, you eventually become. Repetition builds the new you. Not by accident, not by inspiration, but by consistent, deliberate engagement with a thought, behavior, or identity. Your brain was designed to change, but not chaotically. It changes in response to patterns. And the strongest pattern it listens to is repetition. What you do consistently becomes what your brain recognizes as important, as useful, as part of who you are. It's not just the big shifts, the intense experiences, or the rare moments of insight that rewire you. It's the slow, steady rhythm of repetition. That's what builds the new you from the inside out. When you repeat a behavior, you activate a specific circuit in the brain. Do it once, and it's like flipping a switch. Do it again, and the signal becomes stronger. Do it repeatedly, and the brain starts to wrap that circuit in myelin, a substance that speeds up the transmission of neural signals. Think of myelin like insulation on electrical wires. The more repetition, the more insulation, the faster and more efficient the signal becomes. Eventually, that behavior becomes second nature. It requires less effort, less conscious decision-making. It becomes automatic. That's what habit is. Neural efficiency born of repetition. This isn't just about habits of action. It's also about habits of thought. If you constantly rehearse a certain pattern of thinking, whether it's self-doubt, negativity, or fear, you're engraving those patterns into the architecture of your brain. But if you deliberately and consistently choose thoughts of courage, clarity, and purpose, even when they feel unnatural, you are building new pathways that will, in time, become your default. That's how people who once struggled with anxiety become calm. That's how people who were once reactive become disciplined. Not overnight, but over thousands of mental reps. Your brain doesn't care what the pattern is. It only cares how often you repeat it. The brain operates on what's called Hebbian learning. Neurons that fill together wire together. Every time you engage in a repeated experience, the neurons involved begin to form stronger connections. Over time, these connections become so well established that they begin to define your behavior, your emotional responses, and your perception of the world. If you wake up every day and reinforce a morning routine, your brain eventually prepares for that routine before you even get out of bed. If you meditate every evening, your brain begins to associate that time with relaxation and regulation. If you visualize your goals consistently, your brain begins to code that imagery as preparation for real action. This isn't pseudoscience, it's neurobiology. Repetition builds identity, that's the hidden layer. When you do something repeatedly, your brain doesn't just recognize the action. It begins to register the identity behind the action. If you go for a run every day, eventually your brain says, I'm a runner. If you write every morning, I'm a writer. If you reflect, pray, journal, study, focus, again and again, your brain starts to create a self-image around that pattern. And self-image is one of the most powerful drivers of human behavior. Once your brain believes something is part of who you are, it fights to maintain that identity. This is why real change is hard at first. It feels like you're pretending. But keep repeating it, and the pretending becomes becoming. Repetition is also how we build emotional regulation. Emotional responses are not fixed traits. They are patterns. Automated sequences built through repeated exposure and reinforcement. If every time you face pressure, you panic or shut down, your brain begins to associate pressure with fear and helplessness. But if you begin to face pressure with stillness, with breath, with grounded thought, even if you have to force it at first, you begin to show your brain a new way. And if you repeat that often enough, the emotion you once feared becomes manageable. The space between stimulus and response grows. And that space is where freedom lives. There is no substitute for repetition. Motivation fades. Inspiration is inconsistent. Discipline carries you only so far if it's not attached to consistent practice. What changes you is the act of showing up again and again, even when you don't feel like it. Especially you don't feel like it. Because every time you repeat the behavior you want, even in resistance, you're voting for the future version of yourself. And over time, those votes accumulate, not perfectly, not without setbacks, but with momentum. And momentum is the evidence of change taking root. Even when you fail, the repetition matters, because effort itself reinforces the pattern. Every attempt to break an old habit or build a new one, no matter how messy, sends a signal to your brain we are changing. Your brain doesn't demand perfection to change. It demands consistency. Small, daily, intentional repetition is enough. That's how people transform their lives. By stacking one intentional act on top of another until the stack becomes a structure. And the structure becomes a system. And the system becomes the person they always wanted to be. There's also a crucial role that context and environment play in repetition. Your brain is always scanning for patterns, not just in your actions, but in your surroundings. If you always meditate in the same spot, your brain begins to associate that environment with focus and calm. If you always sit in the same chair, your brain prepares itself for learning when you sit there. These cues are powerful because they reduce the need for willpower. They prime your brain for the repeated behavior. The more you align your environment with your intention, the easier repetition becomes. But repetition without awareness can also trap you. if you repeat unconscious, unhealthy behaviors, if you keep thinking the same toxic thoughts, acting out the same emotional loops, you're reinforcing patterns that no longer serve you. That's why awareness must partner with repetition. You can't just go through the motions. You have to bring attention to the act. Each rep, each choice, each behavior must be done with a degree of mindfulness. That's what makes the repetition powerful. That's what gives it the power to rewire, not just reinforce. Sometimes the repetition feels boring. You don't feel different. You don't see results. And your mind will tell you it's not working. But that's because your mind is looking for excitement, not growth. Growth is slow. Growth is subtle. Growth happens in the dark, behind the scenes, in silence. Repetition is like planting seeds. You don't dig them up every day to see if they're growing. You water them. You trust the process. You stay consistent. And then one day, without warning, the shoot breaks through the soil. That's what happens when repetition finally builds enough momentum to become transformation. If you want to change your mindset, repeat better thoughts. If you want to change your body, repeat better behaviors. If you want to change your spiritual life, repeat better rituals. It's not about grand gestures. It's about daily decisions. It's about what you do when no one's watching. It's about what you do when you're tired, discouraged, uncertain. That's where repetition really counts. When it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, when it doesn't feel productive, because that's the ground where the new you is being built. Quietly, steadily, brick by brick. Repetition doesn't mean rigidity. You're allowed to adjust, to course correct, to learn and grow as you go. The goal isn't to be robotic, it's to be consistent, to develop enough structure in your life that you don't fall back into chaos, to create enough stability that your brain feels safe enough to explore new possibilities. And that's the paradox. Repetition creates freedom, because the more you automate the behaviors that align with your highest self, the more energy and bandwidth you have to live fully, to love deeply, to create boldly. There's no shortcut. You can read all the books, listen to all the podcasts, take all the courses, but until you practice something consistently, your brain doesn't change. Knowledge doesn't rewire you. Repetition does. Experience does. Practice does. You have to live the changing, not just stand it, and the only way to live it is to do it every day. Whether it's a workout, a pattern, a boundary, a prayer, a journal entry, or a breath, the work is in the repetition. Eventually, repetition gives birth to transformation. Not because the act is new, but because you are. You show up to the same practice, but now you bring more presence, more depth, more ownership. You used to struggle through the reps. Now they flow. You used to force the behavior. Now it feels like home. And that's the moment the new you emerges. Not in a burst of inspiration, but in a quiet moment of realization, this is who I become. And I got here one repetition at a time.
Your body sets the stage for mental change. The idea that the mind floats above the body like a detached observer is not only outdated, it's biologically inaccurate. The body is not just a vessel carrying the brain. It is a vital, active participant in shaping how the brain works, what it pays attention to, what it feels, and what it's capable of changing. If you want to rewire your brain, you have to start with a system that supports it. Your posture, your breathing, your movement, your sleep, your nutrition. These are not secondary. They are foundational, because before your brain thinks, it listens. And what it listens to first is the state of your body. When you move your body, you signal to the brain that change is happening. Movement drives neuroplasticity, the process through which the brain rewires itself. This isn't just about fitness. This is about transformation. A simple walk can increase blood flow to the brain, which delivers oxygen and nutrients necessary for learning and adaptation. Aerobic activity releases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, a molecule often called Miracle-Grow for the brain. BDNF helps neurons form new connections, strengthening the neural circuits that shape your habits, thoughts, and identity. When you engage your body, especially through consistent and challenging movement, you prime your brain for growth. Your physical state becomes the filter through which your brain interprets the world. Slouch in your shallowly, breathe sluggishly, and your brain receives a messaging: we are not safe, we are not strong, we are not alert. That message will affect your mood, your cognition, your willpower. But stand tall, breathe deeply, activate your muscles, and your brain gets a different signal: we are ready, we are present, we are capable. This isn't mental gymnastics. This is the feedback loop between the body and the brain. You cannot think your way into a better state of being if your body is signaling danger, fatigue, or stagnation. This is why physical routines matter, not just for health, but for identity. When you train your body, you are also training your brain to tolerate discomfort, to navigate stress, to recover from strain. Cold exposure, heat training, resistance work, breath control. These practices do more than challenge your muscles or lungs. They train your nervous system. They expand your window of tolerance. They build resilience into your biology. And that resilience becomes mental resilience. You face adversity, not with panic, but with readiness. Not with collapse, but with clarity. The strength of your body sets the tone for the strength of your mind. Even your posture influences your mental state. Research has shown that upright posture can improve confidence, attention, and emotional regulation. Slouched posture can trigger feelings of helplessness or sadness. This is because your brain is constantly monitoring the internal state of your body, a process called interoception. It uses that data to decide how you feel, what you should focus on, and how you should respond to the world. If your body consistently signals weakness, fatigue, or fear, your brain will reflect that in its thinking and behavior. If your body signals alertness, strength, and calm, your brain will reflect that too. You become what your body rehearses. The breath is another powerful lever for rewiring your brain. Controlled breathing is one of the few ways you can voluntarily regulate your autonomic nervous system. Fast, shallow breaths activate your sympathetic system. Your stress response, slow, deep breaths engage your parasympathetic system, your rest and recovery mode. When you slow your breath, especially through the nose and into the diaphragm, you calm your brain. You reduce anxiety. You create space for deliberate thought. You activate the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for focus, decision-making, and emotional regulation. Just by changing how you breathe, you change how your brain functions. And when you make that a daily practice, your brain adapts to that calm, focused state. Your gut also speaks to your brain. There's a reason the gut is called the second brain. It contains millions of neurons and produces over 90% of the body's serotonin, a key neurotransmitter in mood regulation. What you eat directly affects your mental clarity, emotional stability, and motivation. Diets rich in processed foods, sugar, and inflammatory oils contribute to brain fog, mood swings, and fatigue. But when you nourish your body with whole foods, lean proteins, health fats, complex carbohydrates, and plenty of fiber, you support stable blood sugar, reduce inflammation, and provide the raw materials your brain needs to create and repair neural pathways. You're not just feeding your body. You're feeding the future version of your brain. Sleep is the silent architect of mental change. During sleep, especially deep sleep, your brain consolidates memories, clears out waste products, and resets its emotional circuits. If you're not sleeping well, you're not learning well, you're not changing. Chronic sleep deprivation shrinks the prefrontal cortex, impairs decision-making, increases impulsivity, and weakens emotional control. It makes it harder to focus, to resist temptation, to believe in your own goals. But when you honor sleep as a non-negotiable, your brain starts every day from a place of strength. Rest is not weakness. It's reinforcement. It's recovery. It's the foundation on which change is built. Even sunlight matters. Exposure to natural light in the early part of the day helps set your circadian rhythm, the internal clock that regulates sleep, energy, hormone levels, and even mood. It affects your ability to concentrate, your sense of motivation, and your capacity for emotional regulation. When your body gets sunlight in the morning, it suppresses melatonin and boosts cortisol in a healthy way, waking up your system and enhancing alertness. This sets the tone for your brain's ability to function throughout the day. Without this signal, your internal rhythms drift, and so does your mental performance. All of these physical elements, movement, posture, breath, sleep, nutrition, light, act as instructions to your brain. They shape the chemical environment in which your thoughts occur. They determine which brain regions are active or dormant. They influence which neural connections get strengthened and which ones get pruned. In short, your brain doesn't change in isolation. It changes in context. And the primary context is the body. This means that if you want to think differently, feel differently, live differently, you cannot ignore the role of your physical system. You must take responsibility for the state of your body because it is the stage upon which all mental transformation is performed. When your body is chaotic, your mind will be chaotic. When your body is steady, your mind will have the capacity to become steady too. This is especially important in moments of stress where the body often becomes reactive. Shoulders tense, breath shortens, heart races. And the brain, reading those signals, assumes danger. It ramps up fear, anxiety, or impulsive decision-making. But if in that moment you can slow your breath, soften your posture, and ground your body, you send the opposite signal: we are safe. And in that safety, your brain can regain access to the higher functions: empathy, problem-solving, long-term thinking. You're no longer surviving. You're choosing. That shift begins in the body, not the brain. You can train this every day in simple ways. Start with a morning routine that wakes up the body: stretch, walk, breathe, hydrate. Eat foods that support clarity, not confusion. Move often, not just for fitness, but for flow. Get outside. Feel the sun. Listen to the rhythm of your body and respond with care. Make sleep sacred. Pay attention to posture, to tension, to breath. These things aren't distractions from mental work. They are the foundation of it. When you create coherence in the body, you create coherence in the brain. And when your brain operates in coherence, it becomes fertile ground for new beliefs, new habits, new possibilities. Rewiring the brain is often spoken about as a purely cognitive effort, repeating affirmations, visualizing goals, reframing thoughts. And those tools matter. But without the body support, they become fragile. They don't hold under stress. They don't translate into lasting change. The real transformation happens when your physical life becomes aligned with your mental intention. When your actions, your rituals, your environment rhythms all speak the same language to your braining. We are becoming someone new. We are capable of growth. We are strong, stable, and grounded. And from that grounded state, the mind can stretch into new territory, confident that the foundation will hold. The body is not just the support system for the brain. It is the launching pad. It is the signal that tells the brain it's time to adapt. And every time you care for your body with intention, every time you move with purpose, every you breathe with control, you're writing new instructions into your neural architecture. You're not just living in a body. You're training a system, and that system, when trained well, becomes the engine of mental change,